if you're solving a problem for yourself in the work that you do and in what you write about, then it's a lot easier to find ways to make that work for other people, right? So this was a solution to kind of a personal challenge for me, which was, I think that questions have got disproportional power to unlock possibility, new perspective, new opportunity. And in a world that is increasingly complicated and uncertain, the great questions that I've been asked, and then good questions that I've asked other people, how it's unlocked entire chapters of life. And so I was like, well, what makes a good question? And how can you develop that skill? Because maybe it is a skill, and maybe it's something that can be learned and transferred and applied in all walks of life.
Mike, welcome to SuperLead podcast.
Maanda, I'm a big fan of the show, so it's really, really cool to be here. I noticed that some of my friends and colleagues have been on the show before, and I got to listen to their episodes, and really stoked you made the time for me. Thank you so much.
Oh, lovely. And as I said to you before we went on air, that the show is just about to get better because you are here now with us. Now, so we want to dive in. You wrote an incredible book called 52 Big Questions. So we want to dive into the book in just a moment. But before we do that, I like to just kind of get a sense of who's the author, just who's Mike. Maybe you can kind of just run us just a brief overview. We like it in a journey format, as you will have heard from some of your colleagues that have been on the show. So if you start us off as early as possible, a relative summary, because we need to get into the book, that will be awesome.
Cool. I'll do my best. I'll set an internal time limit for myself of 2 minutes. I was born in the bustling metropolis of Benoni on the East Rand of Johannesburg. I went to Benoni High School. I loved it. I loved growing up in that part of the world. But I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was big. So I landed up doing a degree in industrial psychology, which I then dropped out of to join a band, believe it or not. And at that time, I was very interested in music. I was very involved in the church. And those things taught me a lot about teamwork and collaboration and connection. And that evolved into a career in marketing. So I jumped around from a couple of sales jobs, and I realized quite quickly that I was very connected to the world of advertising, marketing, and branding. But as you know, every job ad in most significant careers comes with that little label of you need 2 years of experience. Right now, like, where am I magically gonna find these 2 years of experience? And so I got very lucky because at that time, social media was becoming a really important movement and technology frontier. And of course, things like podcasts and wikis and blogs were appearing for the first time ever. And I unapologetically used those tools to create a profile, which then led to a column in the Citizen newspaper, which should tell you everything you need to know about the Citizen newspaper. But be that as it may, it was a really great opportunity to start a business, which I thought would help companies navigate the world of social media for the first time ever. And that business became Cerebra. And again, I was very lucky that it grew up really fast off the back of being a first mover in that space. And so as much as I didn't come to advertising through the traditional journey of a red and yellow school or AAA or Vega, I found myself an ad guy and loved that space, really loved that space. And that business was acquired by WPP in 2013. Which was a wonderful learning curve and an extraordinary, like an accelerated degree in corporate finance and politics. And I left that business in 2018 to embark on a new chapter. I didn't know what that new chapter was going to be.
You know what you do. Like, I imagine when you build a business, there's a lot of your identity attached to it. What happened when the business is, who are you?
You're clearly a man that sees through the superficial layers, because that's exactly what happened. Is as soon as I left Cerebra, these big questions around identity started to
Oh,
appear. You know, like
yes.
who who are you if you're not that person anymore? Like, and what happened was this kind of perfect storm of stuff, right? So I left Cerebra. I took a break to go back to business school and get the degree I dropped out of before. And then I turned 40 and COVID happened. And
Mm,
suddenly I was like, I had no business to care about or invest in or even worry about.
mm.
And that was a really tough period. Those 2-3 years were really, really hard. And I did a lot of work around mental health, and I'm a really outspoken advocate around men's mental health, and especially in the corporate world. And
Please
yes,
speak more on that. You
yeah,
might
I
just
mean, we
help,
could do a whole podcast just on that topic, but
you might help someone.
yeah. So, Maanda, I think that men, and particularly men round about our age, you're definitely younger than I am, but men in our kind of generation are very poorly equipped to talk about their own personal struggles. And I think if you've achieved a level of success, been fortunate enough to have journeyed through the business world and managed to achieve one or two things, I think it makes it even harder, because you don't feel like you have a right to speak about your weakness or your vulnerability, because like everybody looks at your story and goes, well, you've done these things, and
Mm.
yeah, if you've done those things, surely like everything is okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I think I learned quite quickly that it's really important to surround yourself with people that you can be honest with and frank with, and to build networks of caring friends and colleagues who can identify with the journey that you've been with. And so I'm very grateful to be surrounded by fellow entrepreneurs, coaches, therapists, people in my life that have, and it's not lost on me how lucky I am to have the resources, both from a network perspective and an affordability perspective, to be able to tap into those. But because of how those people helped me and because of how that journey changed my life, like I'm a big advocate of men speaking up about the spaces in their worlds that they struggle with, and reaching out as much as I can to support people in that journey.
Excellent. No, love that, and thank you for that work. And I think we do need to circle back here, Rulani, on mental health conversation for men. And I guess
Definitely, we could we
everyone,
could have a series of conversations around that, I'm sure.
yeah, we must just fix one thing. This Cape Town thing of yours is a bit of a problem.
I apologize. Yeah, that's why I speak to a therapist, because I landed up here. Yeah, so
So then, after that journey of transition,
yeah, so I dabbled in a couple of small business ideas. I dabbled in trying to be an angel investor, which definitely didn't go well. I'm clearly not an investor. I'm a builder. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And I found myself, despite my best efforts, back in the advertising world at the beginning of last year. Yeah, talk about circling back. Um, and yeah, I think I realized through that journey that I had underestimated what I'd learned in my time in advertising and communication, how much I missed
sure.
building teams and the kind of very unique connection that comes from collaborating in that space and dealing with the unique problems of the advertising and communication space. And yeah, a couple of things happened at once. I at the beginning of this year, I started a new agency in partnership with two very dear friends of mine. That agency is called Second Rodeo, and it's really enjoyed some remarkable early success, which I'm very grateful for. I also wrote the book, as you know, and that's been a project that I've been very glad to get out of my, because I'm haunted by several unfinished manuscripts that sit in a Google Drive folder somewhere, wondering when I'm going to finish them.
Yes,
And
and
then,
then
and
there's
then,
a way
yeah,
pulling
sorry.
this out of you, doesn't she?
Yeah, yeah. Like I work with a lot of people who've had a lot of, you always underestimate how hard it's going to be to write a book. Like you also underestimate how hard it's going to be to start a business. And yeah, I think there's a lot of great ideas there that never get over the line because we assume that getting a book finished, edited, and published is, you just got to put in the time, and it's actually far more complicated than that, as you know. And then I also have a little side hustle. I started a jiu-jitsu gym in Claremont here in Cape Town. So one of the things that I fell in love with during COVID was the martial art of jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And when I moved down to Cape Town, I didn't have a gym that I felt I was happy at, and there was nothing in our area. So we started one, and that's my other little project. Yeah.
I need to gym, and there's no gym here. Let's just build it.
I've got several. Yeah, well, I mean, like, I guess one of the things that as I mentioned, I missed out of the advertising world was the sense of community and connection. And for a long time, the gym actually fulfilled that for me. It was a place where I could go, kind of a third space, where I could go to connect with people, get involved, help out. And I really missed that when we moved down here. So I partnered with a couple of guys who are really brilliant practitioners in this space. I brought the marketing and business side of things, and yeah, Southside Grappling Studio in Claremont is profitable for the first time now in August, and yeah, it's been a really cool journey.
Oh, stunning. Just say more about this martial arts and the gym and what happens, what's unique. You might just convert, someone here. I think Paul might just join your gym when she's in Cape Town or back here in Joburg.
I'm going to hold her to that, definitely. I'm going to hold you to it too, just so you know. Yeah, so I mean, I've been a fan, like a couch commentator of martial arts for a long time. I watch UFC, and I've followed many of the prominent personalities in the sport in MMA for a very long time. And I remember watching some of Dricus's early fights before, became a big UFC star and so on. And I was challenged by one of my friends one day to go, it's all well and good that you sit on the couch shouting at these guys about how they should be performing better in the ring, but maybe you should try this sometimes. And he'd actually done Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and he bought me a uniform, a gi, for my my 40th birthday.
Lovely.
And he said, now you got to try it out. And so there's a couple of really interesting things about jiu-jitsu that are probably quite pertinent for leadership, and that's that, like, when you get onto a jiu-jitsu mat, you get exposed, because it doesn't matter who you know or what you've achieved or how much money you've got or how much money you don't have. There are no shortcuts to getting good at that sport. The only thing that makes you good is experience, is time on the mats. And you realize very, very quickly that you thought you were quite legit, but you were not legit. When you get beaten up by a 58 kilogram, 22-year-old female South African MMA champion, you're like, okay, I thought I could fight, but actually I cannot. And so it really,
doesn't it? I mean, some of us have got a very small pain threshold. I often say when the nurses come and say, "So, are you allergic to anything?" I'm like, "Of course, I'm allergic to pain."
Yes, which is probably wise, yeah. Yeah, so the nice thing about jiu-jitsu is that it's not a striking martial art, so you don't have to do kicking and punching. It is a wrestling and grappling martial art. So, a lot of us as kids used to rough and tumble with our friends and our siblings. So it's actually quite a natural and primal thing to do. What jiu-jitsu teaches you is the right way to do that in a way that keeps you and your training partner safe. But it also teaches you some really amazing skills for life. And it's a great combination of cardio and flexibility and strength, and then also just builds incredible resilience, because if you can deal with that for an hour every day, it like forces you to kind of put everything else in life into perspective. Sorry?
You do this every day?
I should do it every day. I used to do it every day, but I've gotten quite busy recently. So I'm probably training 3 to 4 times a week right now. But I wish I could train more. Yeah, I'd love to be training more.
Sure. So before we get to the book, you were saying you were giving me some leadership lessons out of out of this line of training?
Yeah. So I think, as I said, one of the things you learn very quickly is there's no substitute for experience. You can study and read manuals, but actually, what counts is your time on the mat. I think you learn a lot about humility and the power of humility, and not to underestimate other people, not ever to judge people by their appearance or whatever. You learn that everybody has got value to offer, and your job is to expose and discover and liberate that value. So I think that's an important lesson that I've learned. And then finally, probably the most important thing is that, and this has been the lesson that has been the most important for me, is that forcing yourself to do hard things, really, really, truly difficult things, builds up incredible strength in other areas of your life, right? And I think sometimes as leaders, we default to relying on other people to do the hard stuff for us.
Sure.
And yeah, forcing yourself to do hard things. There's actually a great book about this called The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yes.
Yeah, it's become a practice for me. Like, I think that's what a lot of people do, like meditation and endurance sport and that kind of thing, because it forces you to build up resilience and grit, which serves you in other areas of life as well.
Right. I love this. I think there's another podcast, another book on just the lessons from the gym and all of that. Okay, now let's get into this book. So I've written a book, and I know it's a painful thing and it's a hard thing. The first question is, why will anyone go through this process? So what's happening in our world that necessitated this book to come out?
Yeah, so Maanda, I think you'll know this from your experience in coaching and facilitation, that like if you're solving a problem for yourself in the work that you do and in what you write about, then it's a lot easier to find ways to make that work for other people, right? So this was a solution to kind of a personal challenge for me, which was, I think that questions have got disproportional power to unlock possibility, new perspective, new opportunity. And in a world that is increasingly complicated and uncertain, that's a useful tool. And so I've experienced both in terms of how the great questions that I've been asked, and then good questions that I've asked other people, how it's unlocked entire chapters of life.
Sure.
And so I was like, well, what makes a good question?
Yes.
And how can you develop that skill? Because maybe it is a skill, and maybe it's something that can be learned and transferred and applied in all walks of life. And so that's where the journey started. And then once I had a good sense of what makes a great question, then I thought it would be a useful tool set to provide leaders and leadership teams with a curated set of really great questions grouped in themes that they could then use as a toolkit for themselves for deeper exploration and discovery, but also as a collective tool for discourse, for debate, for collaboration, for ideation, for innovation, as a strategic thought starter. And so that was the genesis of the book. And that sounds like a good idea, but then, as you know, it got really hard when it came to writing the damn thing. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to have an amazing team of people that helped me put it together and helped push me over the line. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. It's something I use in my own capacity as a facilitator and speaker, and something that I really hope that people like yourself and leaders like the ones that you have on this podcast will find it to be a very useful tool that they can dip in and out of, to enhance their perspective and maybe even transform the way they think.
Yeah, so I must tell you, and I concur 100%. So when I was going through some of these questions, there were some that I will look at the question, and my first instinct was to run away from the question. Some of them were hard, and I go, I do need to have an answer to this, but can I just maybe pick up a phone and call someone? Was that intentional? And is that maybe where the magic is at? That some of these are hard. They are not necessarily, as you say in the book, they don't fall into this line where we can go through quick fixes and just follow heuristics and just go from day to day?
Yeah, so I think as leaders, Maanda, we are programmed to look for solutions. Like we
Yeah,
instinctively want to go the shortest route to get to an answer so that we can help people and equip them and enable, and that's a good thing.
yeah,
But sometimes those answers are based on poor information or based, as you said, on dodgy heuristics that we've either inherited or developed over time as a survival instinct, but maybe they don't serve us in the best way, especially when it comes to really complex and nuanced problems and topics. And so I don't think we value as much as we should a deep inquiry. We value getting to an answer really quickly.
yes,
And so there's a couple of things that make a question good, right? Like and deep. So first of all, it's got to be open-ended, because I
yes,
could ask you a question like, I could say, Maanda, do you believe that emerging digital trends like generative AI are going to be a critical innovation driver for businesses now and into the future? That
yes,
sounds like a complicated question, but you're
yeah,
going to answer that by going, yeah.
of course.
Yeah, I mean, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so it doesn't force you to really dig deep. It doesn't
I
force you to
see.
ask something. It's just a yes or a no answer, basically. It
Mm.
sounds like a fancy question,
It does.
but actually it's a very narrow question. It's a very shallow question. So the first thing you want to do with a question is make it open-ended. So if I said to you, um, in what ways do you believe generative AI tools could empower you as a leader into the future? You can't
Oh,
answer that yes or no. You've got to
yeah,
go,
yeah,
ooh, I actually have to kind of think about that.
let me apply my mind.
Yeah, yeah. So the second thing is that it's got to be personal. If a question evokes an emotional response in you, like you said, sometimes makes you want to run away or makes you want to
Yes,
find a simpler version of the question, I
yes.
think that's a really good clue that that's a question you should be sitting with,
Stunning, stunning,
because
stunning.
it is tough, right? Like it does it gives you pause. You're like, oh, like actually I can't ignore that. And actually, there's a very simple version of this that I think we should make a practice in modern day life. So if you and I
Yes,
met at like an event or a cocktail party, and
yeah,
I walked up to you and I said, Maanda, nice to meet you. What do you do?
yeah.
Like we're programmed to ask that and then we're programmed to answer it, right? But if I walked up to you and I said, Maanda, it's so good to meet you. What are you interested in? You'd be like, whoa, hold on. You're not supposed
Yeah,
to ask me that at a cocktail party.
just laughter. I just head now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But I imagine that the quality of the conversation you and I would have after that
absolutely.
would be multiplied by the thoughtfulness of the question you ask in the first place.
Yeah.
The third thing that makes a question good is like a set time frame. So kind of put some limitations in place, like some parameters, right? And then, yeah, I think if you get into the habit of doing that, I think questions can be hugely transformative in their power to open up your thinking. Sorry, I think I interrupted you there.
No, 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 no. What I'm just curious about is so when this question say they're asked to you and or you ask yourself and
Mm.
you don't have the immediate answer, what now? Especially in this like super distracted world where sometimes it's hard to even sit for 2 minutes on one thought.
You know, I was thinking about this the other day because I was at the pet shop, and I was at the pet shop waiting for them to bring my little dog who'd had an operation out. And I was sitting there for like 40 minutes waiting for it. Now, normally you get really irritated when you have to wait for something, and I was even more antsy because my phone had gone flat. And now normally I'd be checking email and WhatsApping, and I'd be like on Instagram, because I'm being productive now, so scrolling through reels, so irritated picking up dog, that kind of thing. Um, and I had a very weird experience, man. I haven't had this experience in maybe 20 years, right? I was bored. I was bored for 30 minutes. I was like, what is this feeling that I'm having? Like this weird experience. What is this emotion that I'm feeling? I was like, oh, I'm bored. I'm sitting here, and the weirdest thing started to happen when I was bored, is I started to think,
Oh,
right? Because normally when I think, I confirm what I'm thinking with a Google search, or I'm thinking, and then I'm like, oh, I must send somebody a message, and I do that or whatever. And in that moment, I was like, this is flippin' cool. Like I'm just thinking about stuff. and like we've gotten so
sure.
unused to being bored and just kind of sitting with a thought or an idea. I was watching a movie the other day on a plane.
Yeah.
Again, because I can't just be bored on a plane. Now
Yeah,
I've got to
yeah,
watch
yeah.
a movie, right?
Yeah.
And I was watching that Winston Churchill biopic called Darkest Hours, the Gary Oldman one.
Yes.
And there's a couple of scenes in there where they just show him sitting like in a room like this, just thinking for hours, right? Because he couldn't check his phone, and like he like couldn't check on Google what was happening on the Eastern Front. He just had to think, you know. And I think leaders have lost that art.
Sure.
We've stopped thinking properly. And so I think if something's uncomfortable, we tend to defer or deflect, and we go straight to solution mode.
Of course.
And you've said it exactly right. We have to sit with the uncomfortable thought or the uncomfortable question or the uncomfortable idea, because that there is what differentiates the best leaders of our time from the laziest leaders of our time.
Sure. Wow. No, powerful. So because this is going to be hard to sit through some of these questions, I think in the book you outline like 5 key reasons and/or the value of big questions. Maybe you can share 2 or 3, and then the rest people can sort of find in the book.
Yeah, so I think we've spoken about some of those points already, but I think, you know, one of the reasons why I love big questions is that they have the power to galvanize people together. Like if you ask a really big question that's provocative, that's meaningful, that people can identify with, it drives connection and cohesion in really interesting ways, you know, like you could even frame your company vision in terms of a really powerful question, right? What would it look like to be the leading financial services brand in the country by 2028? So you're not necessarily being prescriptive. You're forcing people to imagine, and sometimes their imagination is enough, especially when they're talented, smart, capable knowledge workers, which is what we all want in our teams, right? So that's one of the first things. The second thing that I love about a really powerful question is it tends to dismantle legacy thinking and assumptions.
Stunning.
So a lot of what we do in business is informed by the way we've always done things, or a set of assumptions that we've made and kind of agreed upon, right? I think that's actually a really interesting question to ask of your teams. What silent assumptions have we all agreed upon that we shouldn't necessarily take for granted, right? Like that's a powerful big question. And a really well asked question kind of takes away legacy thinking, and it takes away assumption-based thinking, and it liberates us to consider possibility. So one of my favorite questions there is like, what would your company look like if you built it today?
You see, my response is a bit of a nervous laughter.
Yeah, because then it forces you to go, okay, well, how would that be different from the company that we have, you know, and why? Yeah.
Wow. Right. So to get this super practical, perhaps there's a number of sort of these themes that you have positioned in the book around branding and positioning, around leadership and vision, purpose and productivity, self-reflection and growth, questions on people and culture, etc. So I imagine, given our time together, we won't be able to cover all the themes, but maybe we do 2 or 3 to sort of give our listeners a sense of what this might actually look like. Maybe we start at the top with branding and positioning.
Yeah, so Maanda, maybe it would be helpful for me to explain how I got to those kind of topics, because we actually didn't start with the topics. We just started with well, actually, we started with like over 100 questions. And then we slowly but surely kind of kicked the ones out that we didn't like or that we thought were maybe overused, or maybe there were duplicates or similar questions. And eventually we sort of crystallized it down into 50. Well, actually, we crystallized it down into 50 because I made a mistake on a spreadsheet. And I was like, oh no, I've got to find 2 again. So then we went back up to 52 because clearly Excel is not my primary skill. But so yeah, then we got to our 52, and then the publisher said to me, this is amazing, but like we're noticing that there's some common themes here. So maybe it would be helpful for us to group the questions, because if you're a leader who's like, maybe you've got a strategic offsite facilitation, you don't necessarily want to ask questions around branding because that's not the topic. You want to focus in on like strategy and innovation. So we were like, actually, we need to make it easier for people to navigate through the questions in a way that makes sense for them. So we then looked at all of those common denominators and common themes, and we came up with those 6 sections out of that. So there's a little bit of overlap here and there, and there's some questions that could probably live in those sections or in 2 sections. But by and large, it sort of kind of makes sense as 6 different topics. And then what I've done at the beginning of each of those sections is I've written kind of like a personal anecdote around my experience around, let's say, people and culture, or my experience around purpose and productivity, to kind of frame it from my journey. And obviously, I've only worked in certain industries and I only have certain experience, so I don't purport to be an expert in that space. But what I've tried to do is go, these are some of the things that I've learned, some of the tough lessons that I've had to navigate. And this is how some of these questions have helped me get out of those problems or challenges. So that's how we structured it. And I think it makes it a little bit easier for people who don't necessarily want to read the book cover to cover, which actually I don't think you should do. It probably won't be as valuable going from start to finish as it will be going, oh, I'm interested in this right now, so let me start here. And then I'm interested in going over here, so let me start here. I want this to be a tool, not a once-off read that like then goes on your shelf behind me, right? Like it needs to be something you actually want to pull out and use more regularly than that. Yeah.
And you actually even say this in your introduction, that you actually don't have to read this introduction.
Yeah, skip the introduction. Go straight to the good stuff. Yeah.
Stunning. All right. So perhaps we take one, and then maybe we just kind of hear your preamble to that, and then we get to a couple of questions that are worthy of wrestling with.
Yeah, awesome. So, I mean, we can talk about the first section. They're in no particular order. They're in alphabetical order. So we structured it like that. So branding and positioning, which is the first section, also just happens to be my area of business. So that was kind of helpful. It was easy to write. It would be very worrying if I didn't know how to write the introduction for that part. But really, what that section tries to do is help leaders think about the way that their organization's brand is expressed, positioned, and experienced by people, and also then how their personal brand is expressed by their, not just their customers and the stakeholders at large, but also by their own employees. So one of the things I try and land in that section is that the key to branding is understanding that most people think your brand is what you tell your customers or your audience it is. And actually your brand is what your customers or your audience tell their friends it is. It's the stories and anecdotes and emotions and feelings that people have around a brand that make it a brand. It's not a logo. It's not the way that I dress. It's not the cover of this book. It's how you experience everything around that makes it meaningful. And if there's a gap between what I promise to be and purport to be and pretend to be and what I actually am like in real life, similarly for a business, if a business promises to be innovative, helpful, and attentive, but when you experience them in real life, it's the opposite of that. That creates brand inconsistency and brand dissonance, and that erodes trust. And that is a key lever to understanding the power of consistent branding over time, is narrowing the gap between what you promise and then what you deliver as a personal and as a professional brand.
Sure. Lovely, lovely. And what are some of, let's say we went away as a marketing and a branding team to sort of reflect on our brand. What might be some of the good big questions we should wrestle with? Instead of
Yeah.
looking at how some organizations will go at an offsite and they spend that 2 days doing presentations and updates and the ROIs and all that stuff, which potentially could be done via email.
Yeah, true. Well, I'll share two questions that I love in the branding space specifically. So the first one that I love is how would a novelist describe your business or yourself in a book, right? So now you have to imagine that there's this fictional novel that's been written about a company, and you have to now write down how a novelist would describe your business if they were telling that story to a bunch of strangers. It's a really interesting exercise around imagining how people perceive your organization rather than how you intend them to perceive it. So that's a really cool thought experiment, quite a creative thought experiment. The other one, which kind of gets to the root of what you promise as a business, is what is the problem you actually solve for your customers? And then the follow-on question to that is, what is the most interesting or alternative way to solve that problem?
Sure.
And you would be surprised how many companies I work with that cannot articulate what problem it is that they actually solve for their customers.
No
It's
way.
remarkable.
One of the subsections that intrigued me was in the section 2 in the theme of leadership and vision. And I think the first question just hit me already, which is what could the success I want cost me? Just kind of, how do you arrive at that? Because I don't know if I want to wrestle with that question.
Yeah, I mean, this is one that is kind of significant from our own personal journey. And I think one of the other things that makes a good question, is that it forces you to ask other questions so that you can answer it well. So what could the success I want cost me? Forces you to go, well, what is the success that I want? Have I articulated that? Do I know what I'm actually working towards? I know a lot of entrepreneurs who've been very successful and are very unhappy
Sure.
because they've never stopped to go, okay, actually, this is what I wanted. And I can now enjoy my life and enjoy my existence and enjoy my family and enjoy my friends without worrying about if this is enough. There's a follow-on question later on in that section that literally asks, how much is
Yes.
enough?
Yes.
Which is more about kind of goals, measurements, KPIs, and how we tend as human nature to move goalposts. But yeah, what could the success I want potentially cost me? Forces you to think about the price that you're paying for the success that you're chasing. And everything comes at a cost. And being cognizant of that cost is just good business practice. So making that something that's less abstract and more tangible from a lifestyle perspective, I think is a great tool for introspection and personal development.
Sure, sure. And I guess you want to encourage people to wrestle with these questions and then arrive at their own answers, if it were.
Yeah, well,
So,
that's why there's no answer section in the back of the book. you
that's
you
what I
have to
was
make up your own answers. Yeah.
so maybe as we draw to a conclusion, around about this time, there's a lot of strategy offsites and those conversations and the reviews and thinking about potentially what the following year could look like. I wonder maybe 2 or 3 questions that you recommend people shouldn't leave the offsite until they've wrestled with, and then the rest of the questions they can get from the book.
Sure. Yeah. So here's one that's an interesting one: is what would our organization look like if our employees ran it? That that one often initiates a lot of debate and a lot of conjecture. One of the other ones that I love is why would good people leave our business? And then there's ones that are more kind of practical, more strategically oriented, which is like, what would happen if we just suddenly increased all of our prices by 10%? And again, you might go, oh, that's a ridiculous question. But if you actually sit with it and ask that question, you would find that you'd start to unearth some really interesting strategic and operational questions underneath it. So it's easy to dismiss questions at face value, but when you really dig deep into it, when you take them seriously, they will challenge you to think better.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Wow, Mike. It's just, there's a ton of amazing questions here, which I think now I get it. This is not like read through this thing and put it away. This feels almost like a program that a team of leaders should almost kind of pack and go, all right, let's do branding and positioning and spend a decent amount of time, come out of that session with our own answers, and then go to the next piece, and then go to the next piece.
That is certainly my hope. So spot on.
Excellent. So now, where can people find this book?
It should be in your local exclusive books. My friends have been sending me photos of it in their local exclusive books, so you should find it on the business or leadership shelves. It's available on Take-A-Lot. It's available on loot.co.za. There is an audiobook version that is live on Audible and on Spotify and on Apple Books as well. And then there is a Kindle version that is available as well. If you prefer to read your books on a Kindle, you can get hold of that as well. And then there is a Joburg book launch happening on the 30th of September. So 2 weeks from now at the Tryst in Cromerville with the Suits and Sneakers crew. So that should be a lot of fun as well.
Excellent. Mike, thanks so much for writing the book, and also thank you for coming onto the show. You have just made my day already. Yeah, I got some big questions to wrestle with.
Thank you, Maanda. It was a pleasure being on the show.
Excellent. Thank you. We're good. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Stopforth.
I hope that was okay, guys.
Thanks, Mike. That was absolutely awesome.